The forest had a way of swallowing sound. That was the first thing Elias Carter noticed as he hiked deeper into the valley, boots crunching softly over fallen leaves, the towering trees above him forming a canopy so thick that even the afternoon light struggled to break through. It was the kind of place most people avoided. Too quiet, too still, too unknown. But for Elias, a field medic turned wilderness rescuer, it was just another call, another situation where someone, or something, needed help. Except this time, it wasn't a someone. It was a voice, small, desperate, and impossible. Please help. Elias froze mid-step. He turned slowly, scanning the dense undergrowth, his instincts sharpening instantly. Hello? He called out cautiously. Who's there? For a moment, there was nothing, just the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, please, she's fading. Closer this time, and unmistakably real. Elias moved toward the sound without hesitation, pushing past low branches and thick brush until the forest suddenly opened into a small clearing, and what he saw there stopped him cold. A dragon cub, no larger than a large dog, its scales a soft, shimmering silver, wings too small to carry its growing body, and eyes wide with fear and urgency. And behind it, lying motionless against the roots of an ancient tree, was its mother, a full-grown dragon. Her body was massive, her once majestic form now dulled by injury and exhaustion. Her breathing shallow, uneven, barely there. Elias's mind raced. This wasn't just rare. This was unheard of. And yet there it was, real, alive, and dying. The cub rushed toward him, stumbling slightly in its panic, its voice trembling. Please help her. Elias didn't waste time questioning how he understood it. Some instincts went deeper than logic. I'm here, he said firmly, already dropping his pack to the ground. I'm here. Let me see. The cub hesitated for just a fraction of a second, then stepped aside. Trust. Given instantly, because it had no other choice. Elias approached the mother dragon slowly, every movement careful, respectful, his training kicking in as he assessed the situation. All right? He muttered under his breath. Let's see what we've got. The injuries were severe. Deep gashes along her side, scales cracked and broken, darkened blood staining the earth beneath her. One of her wings was torn, the membrane shredded as if something had ripped through it with brutal force. And her breathing, too shallow, too weak. She's losing blood, Elias said quickly, more to himself than to the cub. And there might be internal damage. The cub let out a small, broken sound. Can you save her? Elias paused, looked at the massive, wounded creature, then at the tiny one watching him with desperate hope. I'm going to try, he said, and that was enough. He got to work immediately, pulling supplies from his pack. Bandages, antiseptic, field tools, everything he would normally use on humans now being applied to something far larger, far more complex. Stay with me, he murmured to the mother dragon as he pressed cloth against one of the deeper wounds, trying to slow the bleeding. You're not done yet. The cub hovered close, watching every movement, its small body trembling. What do I do? It asked. Elias glanced at it, then nodded toward his pack. See that metal bottle? The cub scrambled to it instantly. Yes. Bring it here. It did carefully, clumsily, but successfully. Good, Elias said. You're helping. Keep helping. The cub straightened slightly, focused now, less afraid, because it had something to do. Minutes passed, then an hour. Elias worked without stopping, cleaning wounds, applying pressure, using every bit of knowledge he had to stabilize a creature he had never been trained to treat. And slowly, very slowly, the bleeding began to slow. The breathing became just a little deeper, a little stronger. Come on, Elias whispered. Stay with us. The cub leaned close to its mother, pressing its head gently against her neck. I'm here, it murmured. Please don't go. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint shift, barely noticeable, but real. The mother dragon's chest rose and fell more steadily than before. Elias exhaled in relief. "That's it," he said softly. "That's it. You're holding on." The cub let out a small, hopeful sound. "She's better. She's fighting," Elias replied. "And that's what matters." But the danger wasn't over. Not even close. Because as Elias worked, something else had been building in the forest. Presence. Heavy. Watching. He felt it before he heard it. The subtle shift in the air. The unnatural silence. Then, a branch snapped. Elias froze. The cub's head snapped up instantly, eyes wide with fear. "What is that?" Elias didn't answer right away, because he already knew. Slowly he stood, placing himself between the cub, the wounded mother, and the edge of the clearing, where something moved. Large, deliberate, dangerous. Elias's jaw tightened. "Looks like we're not the only ones who found her," he said quietly. The cub pressed closer behind him. "What do we do?" Elias didn't take his eyes off the shadows. He didn't have weapons, didn't have backup, didn't have time. But he had one thing, a choice, and he made it instantly. "We protect her," he said. The cub trembled but nodded. Behind them, the mother dragon's breathing steadied, faint, but present, alive, because someone had chosen to help. And now, they would have to fight to keep that chance alive. Dragon. Elias Carter stood motionless at the edge of the clearing, every muscle in his body tense, his instincts screaming louder than logic as the shape in the shadows began to take form. And he realized almost immediately that whatever was approaching, it wasn't just another predator wandering too close. It was something deliberate, something that had followed the scent of blood and weakness with purpose, and that made it far more dangerous than any wild animal he had ever encountered. The dragon cub pressed tightly against his leg, trembling. "I'm scared," it whispered. Elias didn't look down. "Stay behind me," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "No matter what happens, don't move unless I tell you." The creature stepped into the faint light filtering through the trees, and Elias felt his breath catch. Not a dragon, not human either. Something in between, tall, armored, its form lean but powerful, movements precise and controlled, as if every step had been calculated long before it took it. Its eyes fixed on the wounded dragon behind him with cold, unwavering focus. A hunter, not of survival, but of intent. "Figures," Elias muttered under his breath. The cub clutched at the back of his jacket. "What is it?" "Trouble," Elias replied simply. The hunter stopped just at the edge of the clearing, studying them, its gaze flicking briefly to Elias, then to the cub, and finally settling on the injured mother dragon with a quiet intensity that made Elias's stomach twist. "You should step aside, human," the figure said, its voice low, controlled. "This does not concern you." Elias let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he said, "I think it does." A pause. The hunter tilted its head slightly. "She is dying," it continued. "Her kind does not belong here. You are interfering with something beyond your understanding." Elias glanced back for just a split second, at the cub, at the fragile rise and fall of the mother dragon's chest, then returned his gaze forward. "Maybe," he said, "but she's still alive. And that means I'm not walking away." The silence that followed was heavy, measured, dangerous. Then the hunter moved. Not fast, not yet, but forward. And that was enough. Elias reacted instantly, stepping further into the clearing, putting more distance between the intruder and the dragons behind him. "I wouldn't do that," he warned. The hunter stopped again. "Human," it said, its tone sharpening slightly. "You cannot protect them." Elias's jaw tightened. "Watch me." For a brief moment, neither of them moved. The tension stretched thin. Then, the cub whimpered softly behind him. And that was all it took. The hunter lunged. Elias barely had time to react, throwing himself sideways as the creature closed the distance in an instant, faster than anything that size should have been able to move, its strike missing him by inches as it slammed into the ground where he had been standing just moments before. "Run!" Elias shouted. But the cub didn't run. It stayed, because its mother was still there, still helpless, still fading. Elias cursed under his breath, scrambling to his feet as the hunter turned toward the dragons again. No, you don't. He grabbed the first thing he could find, a broken branch, thick and heavy, and swung it with everything he had. Connected, barely. Enough to make the hunter shift its attention back to him. Not enough to hurt it, but enough to provoke it. Wrong move, Elias muttered. The hunter's eyes locked onto him now, and this time came for him, fast, relentless. Elias dodged again, rolling across the ground as the creature's strike tore through the space he had just vacated, its strength evident in the way the earth itself seemed to shudder under the impact. He couldn't win this. Not in a fight. Not like this. But he didn't need to win. He just needed time. Hey! He shouted, backing away, drawing it further from the dragons. Over here! The hunter followed. Exactly as he hoped. Good. Keep it focused. Keep it away. Behind him, he could hear the cub's soft, panicked sounds as it stayed close to its mother, refusing to abandon her even now. Elias risked a glance, and in that moment, he saw it. The mother dragon's eye, opening, just slightly, awareness flickering back. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Come on, Elias breathed. Just a little more. The hunter attacked again, this time catching him off guard. Its strike clipped his side, sending him crashing hard into the ground, pain exploding through his ribs as the air was knocked from his lungs. Gah! The world spun. For a second he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The hunter stepped closer. Slow now, certain. This is the end of your interference, it said calmly. Elias forced himself up on one arm, vision blurring, body screaming in protest. Not yet, he rasped. Behind him, a sound. Low, deep, different. The hunter paused. So did Elias. And the cub. Because they all recognized it. The mother dragon. Her chest rose, stronger now. Her claws shifted against the ground. And then, with a slow, heavy motion, she moved. Not much, but enough. Enough to remind the world what she was. The hunter turned fully toward her now. And for the first time, there was hesitation. Elias felt a surge of relief. That's it, he whispered. Stay with us. The cub rushed closer to its mother, eyes wide with hope. Mom? The dragon's head lifted, just barely. Her gaze unfocused but present, drawn to the small voice beside her. And then, she saw Elias, still on the ground, still between her and the threat, still fighting. Something shifted in her expression. Something ancient, powerful, protective. The hunter took a step back, not retreating, but reassessing, because now, this was no longer a helpless target. This was a mother, and a mother was the most dangerous creature of all. Dragon. The air in the clearing changed in an instant. What had once been the quiet tension of a hunt had transformed into something far more dangerous. Something ancient and primal. As the wounded mother dragon forced herself further into consciousness, her massive body trembling with the effort but driven by something stronger than pain. Instinct, protection, and the unbreakable bond between parent and child. Elias Carter felt it before he even fully saw it. That shift in presence, the subtle but undeniable surge of power radiating from the dragon as her head lifted slightly higher, her blue eyes, dimmed moments ago by weakness, now glowing faintly with awareness and purpose. The hunter noticed it too. It took another cautious step back, its posture tightening, its movements no longer as confident as before. Whatever it had expected when it entered the clearing, this wasn't it. This was no longer a dying creature lying helpless on the forest floor. This was a dragon waking up. Elias pushed himself upright with a groan. One hand pressed against his ribs as pain flared through his side. But he didn't take his eyes off the hunter. He didn't dare. Yeah, he muttered under his breath, voice rough but determined. You picked the wrong fight. Behind him, the cub pressed close to its mother, its earlier fear now mixed with hope and urgency. Mom, please, it whispered, nudging her gently. The dragon responded not with words, but with movement. Slow, heavy, painful. Her claws dug into the earth as she shifted her weight, her damaged wing twitching slightly against the ground. And though the effort clearly cost her, she pushed through it, inch by inch, rising just enough to make it clear that she was no longer defenseless. A low rumble built in her chest. Deep, resonant. Warning. The hunter's eyes narrowed. For a moment, everything stilled again, balanced on a razor's edge between action and retreat. Elias could feel his pulse pounding in his ears, his breath uneven, his body still recovering from the hit, but his mind was sharp, focused. This wasn't over. Not even close. The hunter shifted its stance, circling slightly, trying to reassess the situation. Its gaze flicked between Elias, the cub, and the mother dragon, calculating, measuring risk. Elias saw it clearly now. This wasn't a mindless predator. It was disciplined, strategic, and that made it far more dangerous. "We can still end this without further conflict," the hunter said, its tone controlled but no longer entirely confident. "Step aside. The dragon cannot survive her injuries. You are delaying the inevitable." Elias let out a short, breathless laugh. "Funny," he said, wiping blood from his lip. "She looks pretty alive to me." The dragon's rumble deepened in agreement. The cub straightened slightly, standing closer to Elias now, its fear still present but no longer overwhelming. "We're not leaving," it said, its small voice shaky but firm. The hunter studied them for a long moment. Then, it moved again, faster this time, more decisive. Elias reacted instantly, stepping forward despite the pain, putting himself between the hunter and the dragons once more. But before the hunter could close the distance, a deafening roar tore through the clearing. It shook the trees, the ground, the air itself. Elias felt it in his chest like a shockwave, instinctively bracing as the mother dragon unleashed a sound that was equal parts fury and warning, her presence surging forward like a force of nature. And then, she acted, despite her injuries, despite the pain that should have kept her grounded. She lunged, not far, not fast enough to fully engage, but enough to place herself directly between her cub and the hunter. Her wings flared partially, the damaged membrane straining but holding just enough to make her appear larger, more imposing, more dangerous than her weakened state should have allowed. Smoke curled faintly from her nostrils, her eyes blazing now with unmistakable intent. Protect. At all costs. The hunter halted mid-step. This time, the hesitation was clear. Elias seized the moment. "Back off!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. "You've seen what she can do, even like this. You really want to push it." The hunter didn't respond immediately, but it didn't advance either. Instead, it circled slowly again, searching for an opening, a weakness, something it could exploit. Elias realized then that this wasn't just about strength, it was about perception. The hunter was trying to determine if the dragon's display was a bluff or a genuine threat, and Elias knew exactly what that meant. If they showed even a hint of weakness, it would strike again. So he stepped forward, ignoring the pain, ignoring the risk, standing beside the dragon now instead of in front of her. Not protecting, but standing with. "We're not prey," he said quietly, but firmly. The cub moved closer too, pressing against its mother's side, drawing strength from her presence. The dragon lowered her head slightly, her massive form still trembling but unwavering in its position. 3 against 1. Not equals, but united. The hunter watched them, longer this time, more carefully. Then, slowly, stepped back. Just one step, but it was enough. Elias didn't relax, didn't move, didn't speak. He knew better. This wasn't over yet, but it was shifting. The hunter exhaled slowly, its posture easing just slightly. Not surrender, but acceptance of a changed situation. "This is not finished," it said. Elias met its gaze. "Didn't think it was," he replied. Another pause. Then, without another word, the hunter turned and disappeared back into the forest. The silence that followed felt unreal, heavy, but no longer threatening. Elias let out a long, shaky breath, his body finally allowing itself to feel the full extent of the pain he'd been ignoring. That, he muttered, was way too close. Behind him, the dragon's massive form shifted again, the strength that had surged moments ago beginning to fade now that the immediate threat was gone. She lowered herself back to the ground carefully, exhaustion overtaking the adrenaline that had driven her to stand. The cub let out a small cry. "Mom! I've got her," Elias said quickly, moving back to her side despite his own injuries. "She just pushed too hard. Help me. Stay close. Keep her calm." The cub nodded, pressing gently against its mother again, whispering softly to her. Elias worked quickly, checking the bandages, making sure nothing had reopened, adjusting where needed. "Easy," he murmured. "You did good. Real good." The dragon's eye shifted toward him, still aware, still present. And this time, there was no fear in it, only recognition, and something else, something that felt a lot like trust. Elias swallowed hard. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We're not done yet, but we made it through this part." The cub looked up at him, hope shining clearly now. "You saved her." Elias shook his head gently. "We saved her," he corrected. "All of us." The dragon let out a soft, low rumble, her breathing steady once more. And for the first time since he had stepped into that clearing, Elias truly believed she was going to survive. Dragon. The forest did not return to normal after that day. It changed, as if it had witnessed something rare and chosen to remember it. The clearing where Elias Carter had first found the dragon and her cub became quieter, but not in the same suffocating way as before. Now the silence felt watchful rather than empty, protective rather than ominous, as though the very trees had accepted what had happened there and adjusted their presence around it. For Elias, however, there was no time to dwell on the strangeness of it all, because survival was still an ongoing process, not a single victory. The mother dragon had held her ground, had driven away a trained hunter while barely able to stand, but the cost of that effort was written across every inch of her battered body, and as the adrenaline faded, reality returned with sharp clarity. She was still critically injured, and if he didn't act quickly and carefully, everything they had fought for would unravel. "All right, easy now," Elias murmured, kneeling beside her once more, his hands steady despite the lingering ache in his ribs. He carefully inspected the bandages, checking for reopened wounds, feeling along the ridges of her scales for heat, swelling, anything that could signal worsening internal damage. The cub hovered close, no longer frantic but still alert, its eyes constantly shifting between its mother and Elias, as if trying to memorize every movement, every action that might mean the difference between life and death. "You did something incredible," Elias said softly, glancing at the dragon's half-lidded eye. "But now you've got to let me do my part again. Okay?" The dragon exhaled slowly, a faint rumble vibrating through the ground beneath them. Not resistance, not fear, but a tired acknowledgement. Over the next several days, the clearing transformed into something unexpected. A place of healing. Elias built a more stable shelter using fallen branches, salvaged tarps from his pack, and carefully positioned supports to shield the dragon from wind and rain without confining her. He constructed a water channel from a nearby stream, ensuring fresh water could reach them without forcing the dragon to move more than necessary, and created a makeshift fire pit at a safe distance where he could prepare food while keeping smoke minimal. Every action was deliberate, calculated, and adapted from his experience in human rescue missions, but now refined through observation, instinct, and the unique needs of a creature unlike any he had ever treated. The cub became his constant assistant. It learned quickly, faster than he expected, fetching materials, staying still when needed, even helping guide his hands by reacting to its mother's subtle shifts in discomfort. There was something deeply moving about the way it watched him, not with blind dependence anymore, but with growing understanding. It wasn't just asking for help now, it was learning how to give it. "You're doing good," Elias told it one evening as it carefully nudged a piece of cloth toward him. "Better than most trainees I've worked with." The cub tilted its head slightly, as if trying to understand the meaning behind the praise, then gave a small, proud chirp. It was a small moment, but it carried weight. A shift from desperation to partnership. The mother dragon's recovery was slow, but steady. Her breathing grew stronger with each passing day. Her wounds began to close, and though she still could not stand fully without strain, she no longer seemed at the brink of collapse. What struck Elias most, however, was the change in her demeanor. The wary tension that had once defined her every movement had softened. She no longer flinched at his touch, no longer watched him as though he might turn into a threat at any moment. Instead, she observed him with a quiet, measured calm, as if she had made a decision about him, and was standing by it. Trust, once fragile and uncertain, had become something deeper, something earned. Brim, or rather, the absence of a dog here replaced by Elias alone, did not diminish the sense of companionship that had formed. Instead, it evolved into something quieter, more profound. Elias spoke often as he worked, not because he expected answers, but because silence felt unnecessary now. Back home, this would be called impossible, he said one morning while adjusting a support along her wing. No one would believe this. A human, helping a dragon like this. The dragon's eye flicked toward him, and for a brief moment, he could swear there was something almost amused in her expression, as though she understood more than she let on. But the world beyond the clearing had not forgotten. Elias knew that. The hunter's words lingered in his mind. This is not finished. Creatures like that did not simply walk away forever. They retreated, regrouped, returned when conditions were more favorable. And as much as Elias wanted to believe they had time, he knew better. Time was a luxury they did not fully have. So he prepared. He reinforced the perimeter of the clearing with subtle markers. Trip lines made from natural fibers, small noise traps that would alert him to movement, pathways cleared just enough to allow him to maneuver quickly if needed. He studied the terrain, mapped out escape routes, and most importantly, he began encouraging the dragon to move more, little by little, building her strength not just for recovery, but for survival. "You're going to have to fly again," he said one afternoon, standing beside her as she flexed her partially healed wing. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon." The dragon shifted, her massive form tense with the effort, her damaged wing trembling slightly as she extended it further than she had before. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't strong, but it was progress. The cub watched in awe. "You can do it," it said softly. The dragon exhaled, a faint plume of warm breath escaping her nostrils, and for a moment, she held the position. Wing extended, body lifted just slightly, before slowly lowering herself back down. Elias smiled faintly. "That's it," he said. "One step at a time." Days turned into a week. And then, the moment came. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden surge of power, no roaring display of regained strength. It was quiet, earned, real. The dragon stood, fully, for the first time since Elias had found her. The ground seemed to acknowledge it, the subtle shift of weight carrying a presence that had been absent before. She wasn't at full strength, not even close, but she was standing, balanced, alive in a way that went beyond mere survival. The cub let out an excited cry, circling her carefully. "You're up. You're really up." Elias stepped back slightly, giving her space, his chest tight with a mix of relief and something deeper. Pride. Not in himself, but in her. "You did it," he said quietly. The dragon turned her head toward him, and then she lowered it, not in weakness, but in acknowledgement, respect. Elias froze for just a second, understanding the weight of that gesture. "Yeah," he murmured, "right back at you." But even as the moment settled, a sound echoed faintly through the trees, distant, familiar. Elias's expression hardened instantly. The hunter, or something like it, returning. He looked at the dragon, at the cub, then back toward the forest. "Looks like we're out of time," he said. The dragon straightened fully now, her presence no longer that of a wounded creature, but not yet that of a fully restored one either. Still, there was strength there. Enough to make a choice. Stay, or leave. The cub looked between them. "What do we do?" Elias didn't hesitate. "You go," he said. The cub blinked. "What?" "You go." he repeated more firmly. You're strong enough now, not to fight but to get away. This place isn't safe anymore. The dragon's gaze locked onto his, and for a moment, there was conflict, then understanding. She turned slightly, nudging her cub gently, urging it toward the edge of the clearing. No, the cub whispered. We can't just leave him. You have to, Elias said, his voice calm but unwavering. That's how this works. I helped you survive. Now you make sure that survival means something. The cub's eyes filled with hesitation, but it stepped closer to its mother, because deep down, it understood. The dragon looked at Elias one last time, a long, steady gaze, and then, with a powerful motion, she spread her wings. Not perfect, not effortless, but enough. With a heavy beat, she lifted, just barely, off the ground, gliding forward into the trees, her cub following close behind. Elias watched them go, waited until they disappeared completely, then turned, facing the forest once more. Alone. The sound came again. Closer now. Elias exhaled slowly. Round 2, huh? But this time, he wasn't just a man trying to save something fragile. He was the one who had already changed the outcome once. And sometimes, that was enough. Dragon,